Hello there everyone, it is me Shadow Leon 659 once again, and this is the first time in months you're actually seeing my face and whatnot. Yeah, because I've been trying to mix up my videos and everything, even though, should I say, the whole videos where you don't see my face are kind of easier to make, and where I just record the voice and show images from movies, TV shows, and whatnot. But yeah, you get my point exactly. So, why you ask, am I doing this video today? It's because I just wanted to talk about a show that I used to enjoy back in the day. And that show for the day is none other than Transformers Prime. Yeah, it was a show I used to love. I was one of those people who back in the day used to think that it was the best Transformers show ever made. Hell, I even liked it so much that I thought it was better than the vast majority of the Michael Bay films and everything. And I know how everyone has called it one of the greatest shows of all time and whatnot, getting the best aspects of Transformers animated, as well as, should I say, the best aspect of Bayformers and whatnot. But unfortunately, my opinion on this show has changed, and wow, this show has a vast majority of problems that I failed to overlook back in the day and whatnot. So anyway, I'm just gonna start out with the negatives and what I didn't like about this show and everything, especially when it comes to plot, the characters, and setting. Like, when I was watching the show in its very first few episodes, rewatching it again, I'm like, we already start with the Autobots on Earth and whatnot, as if I've missed a vast majority of the show and an entire season and whatnot worth of story and everything. We just start in the middle of, should I say, the Autobots on a mission and all that stuff. Then of course we see later that Cliff Jumper, played by Dwayne Johnson, eventually gets beaten up and captured by the Decepticons, and where he is systematically killed by Starscream and everything. Now I have a problem with Cliff Jumper's death. The show tries way too hard to be this dark and brooding show by showing us, the audience, that, oh, anyone can die in this show. I get where the writers were coming at, but in hindsight, the execution just wasn't the best, because we never really got to know who Cliff Jumper was. It was a character who the characters were feeling bad for that he died, instead of we, the audience. And speaking of the characters, let's just say the characters aren't really the best written characters and everything. Let us start with the Autobots and whatnot, because, wow, I can go for entire hours of why the Autobots aren't really the best characters in the show. Optimus Prime is really a dull and boring character who doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, he's the reason why many modern fans see Optimus as such a boring character and whatnot. Compare that to all the other Optimus Primes, and where they were portrayed as a father figure, or in the case of Transformers Armada being portrayed as a military officer. And speaking of Armada, they portrayed him as a military officer, but at least he had personality. He was able to joke, he could have fun, he could have a laugh once in a while. This version of Prime is, I am Optimus Prime, and you must follow my orders, because it is the right thing to do. And moving on to Bulkhead. Bulkhead doesn't really have that much of a character, and he just feels like a really, boring muscle of the team and whatnot. And Ratchet doesn't really have a whole lot of personality going on for him. And let us also talk about RC. RC, who for a vast majority of the show just acts like a bitch constantly and whatnot. and we're supposed to feel bad for her that her partner Cliff Jumper died and everything. Once again, we didn't know how the relationship between her and Cliff Jumper was, so her sympathy comes across as half big and everything. And then at the last minute, they just decided to throw in, oh, my partner was killed by arachnid and all this stuff. And don't even get me started on Bumblebee, in where he is just pretty much the Kid Appeal character who a vast majority of the show tries to focus on and whatnot, but he doesn't really do a whole lot. In fact, contrast that with Armada Hotshot, in where Armada Hotshot actually had a character arc, where he started off as the rookie, who was cocky, immature, and often broke the rules. But as time went on, he eventually progressed into a mature and more relatable character, accepting responsibility and everything. Even his character development carries over into Energon and all that stuff. And now let us talk about the human characters. The only one who I particularly liked was Ernie Hudson's Agent Fowler and everything, because he was the only one who at least contributed to the plot and everything. The kids, I just didn't really care about each and every one of them. Jack is, should I say, pretty much a bland character who doesn't really do a whole lot. Raph is the generic Kid Appeal character who's I'm the brains of the group and I can do whatever I want. And Miko, oh my god. Miko was easily the most unlikable of all of them. And the movie tries to give her some kind of the show tries to give her a lot of sympathy by saying, oh, you don't understand. She grew up in a family of, should I say, in a strict family and whatnot, where they're not supposed to allow her to have fun and everything. How am I supposed to buy her backstory and everything when all she does for a vast majority of the show is act like a reckless brat who puts people's lives in danger and everything? How funny is it that people bitch and complain about Kicker Jones from Transformers Energon, but yet they are willing to give this bitch a pass? If anything, I would rather take Sam Witwicky from the Bayformers movies any day of the week over these human characters, because at least Sam had a purpose of plot. Hell, I'd even go a step further. Even the kids from Transformers Armada at least had a purpose to the plot, even though, yes, you could argue that the kids in Armada were a bit intrusive, but at least they had a purpose to the plot, especially Alexis's relationship with Starscream. Now let's get on to the Decepticons, and I know a lot of people have praised this version of Megatron as being a fearsome version of Megatron, all because he has an intimidating look and Frank Welker gives a solid as hell performance. But the problem I have with this Megatron is that he is just an incompetent moron who makes so many bad decisions left and right that he is both the biggest liability to the Decepticon Alliance and the Autobots' greatest asset and everything. And don't even get me started on his whole trope of nobody kills Optimus but me. I swear to God, any villain who does the whole nobody kills the hero but me automatically loses respect and all that stuff. And Starscream is just pretty much an inconsistent character, as the writers just didn't know what to do with him exactly. One minute he's part of the Decepticon Alliance, then he defects from the Decepticon Alliance, and you may probably think he's gonna join the Autobot side and whatnot. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Soundwave was pretty much just a bland NPC with zero personality and whatnot. And even other Decepticons who at least tried to have a semblance of a personality get wasted. Breakdown, who was portrayed as somewhat of the token good teammate, and you may think that they're gonna go somewhere with this character and everything. Nope. by the time we get to Season 2, his character is unceremoniously killed off. Or how about Dreadwing, who was shown to be somewhat of the honorable villain type, who had a code of honor, in where he was one of the more where he was the honorable villain type. What do they do with him? He too is unceremoniously killed off. And of course, Arachnid and RC have some kind of a rivalry with each other. Once again, another plot point that is established only for it to be completely abandoned. Wow. This show does a thing that another Transformers show does. This show was guilty of establishing plot points just to disregard them completely afterwards. You know, all the people who criticize Energon for doing that, those criticisms automatically apply to Armada and honestly apply to this show, Prime and whatnot. Because everything you hated about Energon also applies to this show. And you wanna know what's so funny about a show that claims to be dark and brooding and everything? They try way too hard to raise the stakes and up the ante, but the show just feels like it's just playing things safe and everything. Even Beast Wars, a show that wasn't trying to be dark and compelling, at least had the decency to kill off more than half the cast. And it is also worth mentioning that the show tries way too hard to have this complex storytelling when in reality, it's just playing things safe. I mean, take Transformers Armada for example. A show that was plagued by inconsistent animation and a rushed dub. Looking aside those minor details, Armada actually went out of its way to have deep themes and deep meaning and deep complex storytelling. This was a show that turned Starscream into a tragic anti-hero. It was also a show that explored the dilemma of Optimus Prime. Hell, you'd think that the show started off as another the Autobots the good guys and the Decepticons the bad guys, when in reality that wasn't really the case. I mean, we even had a flashback in where Hotshot mentioned a tragic backstory of one of the Autobots who defected to the Decepticon Alliance because Hotshot abandoned him to die and whatnot, and how seriously it was being treated. And hell, the characters in this show were acting more like soldiers on a battlefield. And Megatron even telling the Raph, Carlos, and Alexis that war is hell, there will always be casualties no matter what, when they were in the battle with Unicron and everything. And let us also talk about that version of Megatron, for instance. He was portrayed more as being an honorable villain type, who at least showed some level of respect for Optimus Prime and whatnot. And heck, in the episode where he kills Optimus and all that stuff, instead of him being, haha, I have finally killed Optimus Prime, now there's no one who stands in my way, Megatron actually was shocked and showed a level of sadness and depression, like the Joker in Batman the Animated Series when, should I say, Batman was dead and everything, as the Joker quotes that line, without Batman, crime has no punchline. Megatron falling into a state of depression and anxiety, so much so that he eventually stops that war just because of Optimus' death and everything. And when Optimus gets revived and sees him again, Megatron is relieved and whatnot. And heck, during the final episode, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen Armada yet, Megatron and Optimus get into a fight with each other. But before they do get into a fight with each other, Unicron does call out Optimus on, his hypocrisy and everything by saying, you think you're fighting for what's right, when you crave war and battle like a human craves oxygen. Which, like I said, explored the dilemma of Optimus Prime and everything. And heck, it also showed us that not all Decepticons are completely evil and everything. At least that show had the decency to give each and every one of the Decepticons distinct personalities. Now what does this show even have to offer? Just not a whole lot. And each action set piece, this show is just the definition of style over substance. It shows you how good the animation is, when in reality it doesn't have a whole lot going on for it. And, you know, it also repeats the same mistakes of previous Transformers shows like the whole Find the MacGuffin plot and whatnot. Why are there all these objects on Earth? Not really explained. This is a show that, in my opinion, have a lot of huge missed opportunities. The action set pieces, I know people have praised the action set pieces for being high octane action and everything, but all the action set pieces just boil down to is a big gun shoot, or them just murdering faceless mooks left and right. How funny is it that Energon, a show where a vast majority of the characters who died were just random red shirts, felt like it had more suspense and tension than this show and whatnot. Yeah, like I mentioned before, the animation is good and everything. I really did like how it was pushing hardware past its limits and giving us that cinematic feed. Peter Cullen and Frank Welker do give solid performances in their respective roles. It was also nice the music was actually pretty good and whatnot, despite a boring-ass theme song. Knockout was one of the few characters in the entire show who had a distinct personality. By season 3, I did like the whole it made it feel like the Decepticons had taken over Earth and everything right before the infamous cop-out in where the Decepticon-based Dark Mount is destroyed in an anticlimactic manner, and I did love the inclusion of the Predacons and everything, those big dragon-like Transformers. So if you're wondering how I'm going to rate Transformers Prime, I'm going to give Transformers Prime a 4 out of 10. Yeah, that's my review of Transformers Prime, a show that I don't think is as good as everyone says it is. And honestly, people, I would rather much rewatch Transformers Armada or Animated any day of the week. Heck, I'd even put an entire marathon of Beast Wars just to get this show out of my mind. So anyway, that's all I've got for today. Shadow Leon 659 signing out. Goodbye, take care. Please subscribe.